go into every conversation and try to set up systems if possible to just genuinely help your customers. It's not complex, it's a simple concept, but go in there thinking through, okay, how can I be one step ahead of them and really shine light on problems that they might, barriers that they might not realize, and to help them to be successful.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to episode 57 of Sales Stories in Real Life. I'm your host, Alex Bruschi, and this is the show where professional salespeople share their stories on memorable buying experiences. Today, we have a very special guest, close friend of the show. She is a revenue enablement leader who has sat in nearly every seat on go-to-market teams for over a decade. She is a LinkedIn top voice. Make sure you connect with her on LinkedIn. Welcome to the show, Maria Bross. I'm really excited for this story because this one very much hits home for me. I hear you had a really memorable buying experience at a local bakery. What happened there, Maria?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on the show. It's awesome to be here. And I did have a very memorable experience at a local bakery here in Charleston, South Carolina called Baguette Magic, which with a name like that, how could you not be magical? It truly is. It lives up to its name. So to tell you a little bit about context before going into this, I had recently, at the time that I had gone to this cafe for the first time, I had recently had my son. He was an infant. This was one of my first outings by myself with my son. And I was just a mess and nervous to take him out and scared he was going to start screaming in the middle of the cafe. And what would I do in that scenario? And so when I was meeting one of my girlfriends, Shelga, who's my best friends, with her daughter, and we go to this spot, has really great baked good. These like homemade Pop-Tarts that are delish, right? Great food, all baked there. So anyway, I was really excited to get out, excited for a nice coffee with my friend to catch up. And my worst nightmare happens where my son just starts losing it 3 sips into my coffee. And so I just get up, he's inconsolable. And I'm like, sorry, Shelk, I'm going to have to meet you a different time because I'm not equipped to handle this right now. And so it's one of those like fast casual type places where you have to clear your own plates and all of that good stuff. So I'm clearing my plates. He is screaming. My son is screaming. And I'm just looking at my cup of coffee. Man, I have to put this down. And I really want to enjoy this whole rest of this coffee. And so out runs the head baker, and she gives me a to-go cup, pours my coffee in it, and says, "Leave, don't worry about clearing your table. You're good. Go on. Do you need help out to your car?" And so that experience was just so memorable to me and made me feel so seen and not embarrassed. And she just got me. I was part of a little exclusive mom club. And so I felt okay in that moment. They're going to take care of me.
That's incredible. And it's ironic because good friend of both of ours is Riley Blaisdell, and he and I speak about this all the time. I'm sure you two do as well, is like service is sales, right? That's what I'm getting from this is like really excellent service is selling, right? That's very much what we preach here is how important the buying experience is. And there's so much that I want to dig into on this, but where I would start is just the proactiveness of the staff there, right? It's one thing to have great coffee, to have great pastries, to have a great name. The name is amazing. But it's another thing to
Yeah.
really take your customer service on the offensive instead of the defensive, especially when you're dealing with a new mother, a crying baby, right? As you mentioned, you went out to meet a friend. It was like a moment of solace. And then your worst nightmare happens and the kid starts screaming and you're like all frantic, right? And I'm sure, obviously, you're dealing with post-birth things. So a lot is happening all at once. And then this person comes along proactively, and rather than like being annoyed about having a screaming child in their bakery, they're like proactively trying to mediate the situation and trying to help the situation. What's going through your mind there, right? I just can't even imagine being in that moment.
Yeah. I think it was just like I felt seen and I felt like I wasn't alone. And I felt like she took a probably, I don't want to say traumatic, right? There's so many bad things that could happen in the world. This is not anything traumatic at all, but might be embarrassed to come back again had that not happened. And that would have been a shame because it's a delicious cafe, right? So she took a bad experience and made it be like, wow, like I've got like, it truly does take a community. It takes a village. And I just felt so part of a community of women because she probably was a mom. It was like she could read my mind. And because of that, I am just their number one raving fan. I repost their homemade Pop Tarts on my social media all the time. They sell beanies and I wear those. And so I give them as gifts for the holidays. And yeah, like that brought so much loyalty. And most experiences, whenever I've gone back, have been that way too. It's very much like a community type of cafe. They have these like little cards that you can buy to give a coffee to anybody that you want. So they would you write down on a card someone who is a new mom, and it would just be gifting that person a coffee, someone who is a first responder, or whatever situation you want to say. And I think that it just builds community, makes you feel like warm and fuzzy inside when you go into this cafe. And I think that's what differentiates it, because there's a lot of great places to get baked goods in Charleston. Like we have amazing food, but this one specifically just really does that different.
You bring up such a great point that I never even considered. Is it's not just a poor experience, let's just say, to have your kid freaking out inside of there. But to your point, maybe you don't want to go back because then it's, oh, people remember and all this and that. And it like takes that potentially, I'm never going back and I'm an evangelist, right? This is my place. What do you think it showed to the people that happen to be sitting there as bystanders, let's just say, or even let's flip it around and say, if you were in one of the bystander seat, let's say someone else was you, right? Someone was there and their kid started freaking out and you saw someone run behind the counter and give them a to-go cup. Hey, the next one's on us. As a bystander, how would you feel about that if it wasn't necessarily you in that position, but you saw someone else going through that?
Yeah, so it was such a direct experience for me because it was me in the moment. But if I was a bystander to that, I think I would still become an evangelist of their brand and their bakery and refer our Airbnb guests to go there and anyone who comes and visits Charleston, because it's okay, these are good people. Not only do they make great baked goods, they can take a kind of frantic situation that has nothing to do with them and really help turn it around. So it's not even, oh, there was a hair in my Pop Tart that I bought or something that they created a bad experience. It was like completely outside of it. And they still stepped in because they wanted it to be a good experience for one of their customers. So I think like directly or as a bystander, it really doesn't change much. I would still become a raving fan.
It was a move that not only won you over for life, but I'm sure, like, to your point, that entire dining room, it was like, oh, what a great thing. So just like incredible customer service goes a very far way. Let's translate that to B2B now, because you've obviously been in revenue leadership, you've led salespeople before. How would you
Mhm.
coach your salespeople up on having these proactive moments, right? Whether it's proactive service, proactive selling, proactive objection handling, right? Like, I think that's a very common theme in selling these days is you have to be proactive instead of reactive. How would you coach your sellers up on that? And what advice would you give to someone?
Yeah, I think so much of like customer service has been poorly defined as saying please and thank you and being polite and like just doing whatever the customer asks. But that's not necessarily like in service to the customers. That's all kind of surface level. I think that real customer service is exactly what I experienced. And I don't even think it was something that this head baker really like intentionally decided to do for like a customer service experience, right? She just was like saw somebody who needed help and wanted to step in because she could help. And so I think that the way that you can help empower your team to do that with your customers is like number one, trying to diagnose what the real problems are and anticipate like what could get in their way. So for example, like a champion, right? So you find someone that's a direct end user that experiences the problem that you help solve, but isn't necessarily the decision maker. So one thing that you could do to be proactive, maybe it's the first time like they've never bought your product before or like your software. And so what they could do is help show them of, hey, you're going to need legal and compliance stuff. Let me proactively send you our SOC 2 credentials. Because because they might not know that. So if you're able to be proactive in like what they're going to need to solve the problem with your technology or your product, that is incredibly beneficial. But also if you, even as so little of an effort as saving them as a lead in sales nav and being able to like see that on in Sales Nav, you can have this like curated feed of your saved leads and just noticing, being proactively notified when they get a promotion or they change jobs, go to a new company, and you can just slip in that nice little note to congratulate them. Maybe they got funding or released a big new product enhancement. Just like finding a way to keep that on your radar through Sales App or even like Google alerts, it can be extremely helpful and have you come off as like you're actually building that real relationship and anticipating, like being aware of what's going on in their world without the customer telling you, and then also anticipating how that will impact their world, right? So I think the more that you can do that and set up those little systems to proactively notify you, the better.
I love that quote. Proactively know what's going on in their world without them telling you. That like needs to be like stamped on like a poster board, because you're absolutely right. Whether it's a B2B seller, whether it's a bakery worker, right? I hate to distill it so simply, but it's just like caring, right? Like that person didn't run out and give you a to-go cup thinking, ooh, we're going to sell her a bunch of beanies in the future. Like they were thinking like, no, this person needs help. Let me help them. And everything that comes from then on is organic. And it's similar with us sellers working with customers, right? It's not, hey, I'm going to send them over our SOC 2 so that they sign quicker. It's going to be, hey, I'm going to send them over my SOC 2 because when they go to their legal team, that's what their legal team is going to ask them. Let me save them some time, right? Let me anticipate those things that they cannot or they are not and be helpful, right? Like selling is helping, like selling is service. So I love that. I guess you've obviously sat in a lot of go-to-market seats. Do you have any maybe examples, maybe outside of revenue leadership, whether it's on the enablement side, right? Like anything else where you notice proactiveness being very impactful throughout a sales process, or what would you say to that?
Yeah, let me take a minute to think about that. Hmm. I think the most direct experience I could tell you is when you're working with a champion who doesn't have purchasing decision making. Sorry,
Authority.
I'm off on a tangent now. Like
Authority.
having, yeah, purchasing a and you can help empower them and anticipate what they need to make that purchasing decision among their buying team, who's going to need to be involved, what they're going to need, how to shape that narrative. And you're like almost like this coach for them. And so that's probably the most direct way I think that you can anticipate their needs. Another thing too is just like going into every conversation and thinking like, how do I help this person make the best business decision, even if it's not me? And I think if you go into that, yeah, in the short term, you might lose some deals that you could have fudged through, but it's going to pay you back times 10 when those folks come back to you. Or I think the more that you can do that, really the better. And I think a big thing that shifted to me in maturity in discovery as a rep, when I first started out, I would ask my qualification questions. I would ask discovery that was specifically related to what I sold and was almost sometimes leading questions because I wanted to get it to a specific answer, because I wanted to say, oh, you're in luck, we can help with that. And I think that's something that a lot of novice sellers get into the trap of. I definitely did for a long time. But I think the way that you can step aside from that and really grow in your relationships and your results of your customers is if you look like holistically, like you try to look holistically at what are the main initiatives for them, what are the main blockers for them, even if it's outside of your tool, right? What's upstream from what you're selling? And I think that's a really proactive way. For example, in my last role at Revenue IO, what we sold was down market to a lot of problems that sales teams face in terms of strategy and terms of like contact information. We were more of like a sequencing and like coaching tool. But before they could really see benefits from that, they had to have the strategy piece figured out, the contact information piece figured out for them to see the value of what I sold. So A lot of times I would just say I try to dig into those areas first, even though I really couldn't help sell them any sort of services that were related there, just because I genuinely cared about their success on our platform. So I think the more you can go into those conversations proactively and also just thinking, okay, if this was my cousin, if this is someone that I cared about, and hopefully you do care about your potential buyers, but what would my recommendation be? What questions would I ask them to help them get to their goal, even if it's not something I can sell them myself?
I love a lot of what you said there. And towards the end, like you're talking about elevating yourself to a partner, right? Because then, like, when they do need your product in the future, when their colleagues need your product in the future, when their friends, right? Whoever it is needs their product in the future, then you're like that baguette magic, or I forget the name exactly, where you're telling everyone and then the organic growth just flies from there. I also love what you were talking about earlier with going into a call with a set of questions with a sort of lead in destination in mind, because that's so relatable. I've been there as well. And what I would tell my old self is you're not slick. They know what you're trying to do, and you're just either setting yourself up to get ghosted, lose trust, or come off salesy, come off commission breath. I think you said it so perfectly. Go in there and help, whether it's your tool or not, because either way, you're establishing that trust of a partner and playing the long game around, hey, you're actually showing somebody results. And I love the example of your previous company, where if you didn't solve these upstream problems first, they wouldn't see the benefits of your product downstream. So that's amazing. While we're on the B2B topic here, we've got a lot of B2B sellers that are listening to the show right now, Maria. We can only retain so much information. This has been a great story. I'm sure a lot of people can relate. I'm sure, hopefully, a lot of new mothers can relate. And I hope that folks are just as kind to them as they were to you in that moment. What would be the one big takeaway that you would give to our B2B sellers? It doesn't necessarily have to be about being proactive, doesn't necessarily have to do with the things that we spoke about. Like, what would be your one big takeaway for folks to start seeing results immediately?
Yeah. So I think based on that experience, my one takeaway would be to go into every conversation and try to set up systems if possible to just genuinely help your customers. It's not complex, it's a simple concept, but go in there thinking through, okay, how can I be one step ahead of them and really shine light on problems that they might, barriers that they might not realize, and to help them to be successful, to help them have a good experience, even if it's not with my tool, or even if it's not a problem that my company or I created. Like, just genuinely serving them and doing what's best for them. Simple.
Amen. Keeping it simple is always best. At least that's what I've found. So this is excellent, Maria. We really appreciate you being on the show. As we mentioned earlier, you've sat in nearly every go-to-market seat. So your experience in this is so well received. Thank you for sharing this with us all. Why don't you plug some with the audience before we jump? What are you working on? How can people support you? Where can people find you?
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks so much, Alex. And really enjoyed the conversation. I love what you're doing with this podcast. Yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm working on some side projects right now around go to market messaging and strategy. So if that's something that y'all are struggling with from a pipeline perspective and you really want good quality and you want to evolve from like the volume spray and pray type of approach, then send me a message. I might have some ideas from you, and yeah, we can chat from there.
Perfect. Find Maria on LinkedIn, send her a message. LinkedIn top voice. Her content is amazing. You will not be mad. Sales Stories in Real Life, fam. Thank you for another great episode. And thank you if you're still listening. We'll see you next week. Cheers.